So we are gonna get started on apples today, and I'm gonna take us. I'm gonna start off all the way at the beginning of apples, and then we will probably do more apples tomorrow, and we'll finish out the week. Our Friday, since I didn't call in on Tuesday, we'll do a lesson tomorrow, also on apples, and then we'll see where we get with that. So I'm going to bring up our whiteboard, and I want you to raise your hands and give me some information about what you know about apples, what you want to learn about apples, and I have some things that I already want to talk about, but I'll make sure that I bring it all in for our couple of lessons that we're going to do. I'm trying to get so I can see all of you. Okay, so Elijah, so let's start with you. I'm going to take notes.
Do they have any medicinal properties?
Good question. Anything else about apples that you're like, you have questions about? Nothing? All right, who else? Or you can put it in the chat if you want.
Okay. I was going to ask, what is the history of apples and its evolution?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to start with. Anybody have any ideas about apples, things they really want to know about? Jaden.
Is there a way to keep them to where you don't have to so you don't have to do pesticides on them to keep them healthy almost, but not healthy?
Yeah, so a way to grow apples, let's say organically or naturally. That's a great question. We'll probably get into that tomorrow. Barron, anything you want to learn about apples specifically? Nothing? Just in it for all the lessons. Elliot, you have questions?
Yes. What types of apples are there?
Sure, there are many, many, many types. Anything else?
No.
Okay. Elijah, coming back to you.
How long can an apple tree live for?
Good question. Anything else? Liv, do you have questions, or did you put them in the chat? Let's see. Oh yeah, okay. Liv asked, can apples grow in a food forest? Good question. Anything else, Liv? Uh-oh, I'm not hearing you. As usual, stinks. Try again.
Hello?
There you go. Gotcha.
Okay, cool. I don't know. I think that the flesh is like interesting because it like makes like bubbles, and I always wanted to know how that happens.
It makes bubbles?
Yeah, like the flesh of an apple, when you bite into it.
Oh.
Cut it, you can see that there's like bubbles. Like
interesting.
The flesh grows in like a pattern, and I always just thought that was interesting.
Maybe we'll look into like chemicals that are in apples, like that will probably go along with medicinal properties or whatever that Elijah was interested in.
Okay.
Cool. Elijah, another question?
Yeah. How long does it take for an apple tree to grow?
How long does it take to grow? Okay. I'll just say how fast do they grow? Cool. This is a bunch. This is really good. So I am going to get started with the history of apples, and I'm going to take you on a journey, a very, very long journey, way, way, way far back in time and far, far away from where we all live, to this place, Kyrgyzstan. Has anyone ever heard of this place before? Liv has heard of this place. Nicole has heard of this place. Elijah has not. Baron has heard of this place. Cool, that's good. I am proud of you. This is good. There are a lot of people that are my age who have never heard of this place. So I'm very happy. You are all so smart, but I already knew that. So this place, Kyrgyzstan, and this place to the north of it, Kazakhstan, these are two countries in Central Asia, and they're very mountainous. They're pretty cold a lot of the time, and they are this Kyrgyzstan all along here and Kazakhstan all along up here borders China. So we all know where China is. China's huge. This is where the apple came from. Jaden, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I think I've heard of that.
You think you've heard of it? Yeah, it's a
Maybe
place.
like from a story or something.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of really amazing things that come from this place that still continue to be in this place. One of the things so I'm going to show you, I'm going to get out of this map, and I'm going to go to a website that I will put on my website as a link when I post this class. Do y'all know what National Geographic is? So the National Geographic Foundation, the National Geographic did this really, really long exploration of, sorry, just making sure I have it up on my internet, the history of apples and saving the wild relatives to apples. And these are some photos. Can you all see this screen okay? Cool. So this is, I'm going to go back to the beginning. Boop, boop, boop. Oh, come on. Maybe it won't let me. Give me 1 second. I want to show you. It's always way slower. There it is. Okay. So can you all read up here this word Malus sieversii? Malus sieversii is the Latin name of the first of the wild apple relative, where our apples that we eat all the time, that we buy in grocery stores, is where they come from. So they look pretty similar to the apples that we eat, but the thing that's really interesting about them, they're wild, and there are trees that cover this entire forest in this place in Kyrgyzstan and in Kazakhstan. There are trees of this particular species that grow everywhere in these forests, and they all look very, very different. They all have different types of fruit on them, different colors of ripe fruit, different sizes of fruit. The trees themselves can go anywhere from like trees that creep along the ground that are only like 6 inches tall, that just kind of like spread out, kind of like the June berries we learned about the other day. Or they can be up to like 100 feet tall. They all look so different, but they have the same genetic makeup. They all are the same species. But they just look wildly different. Some of them don't have fruit on them at all. Some of the fruit tastes really sweet. Some of the fruit tastes really bitter. Some is really, really sour. And a long time ago, I actually don't know exactly when plant lovers, people who were searching for new varieties of plants to domesticate. Do we know what the word domesticate means? Elijah, you want to tell us a little bit about what that means?
I don't know exactly what it means. I know I understand what it means. I don't know how to explain exactly.
Okay. So can you maybe what's the difference between a cat that's like a wild feral cat and a domesticated house cat?
A house cat what is not as violent as an outdoor cat.
So they're wild, right? The outdoor cat is wild, and the domesticated cat is like, it's kind of like it can get along with humans.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's like kind of a broad idea of what we're dealing with when I'm talking about wild versus domestic. When you're talking about any kind of plants, especially fruit trees, the fruits that we eat very, very commonly that come from grocery stores, have all come from wild relatives. They all have wild, like, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. And humans, over a long period of time, have domesticated them, which means that we have found the kinds of plants in the wild that we really like, the particular types that we really, really like, and we have turned them into, we've used plant breeding to turn them into more like exactly what we want them to be like all the time. So that's how we get most of the common things that we have in our gardens and in our orchards, is all through domestication over a very long time. Jaden, you have a question?
Oh, sorry, I didn't see it. I keep thinking it says, like, you muted me, so I'm like, reading it. Our one cat, his name is Shadow, and he's half ferocious beast and half, please give me a pet.
So he's a
They're like,
half wild, half domestic cat?
yeah, there's like one side that's like, get away or I'll rip your face, and the other side that just, I just want a few pets from you. Give me some food.
Yeah.
It's like half and half. And Luna's just a scaredy cat.
That's actually interesting. So you asked a question about having, about how to take care of apples, like naturally or organically in your garden. So I think
Yeah, about having like bugs.
that's like a little bit, it's similar to how I would think about having an apple in my yard if I wanted to have an apple trees that were really strong and could survive some harsh conditions without spraying them all the time. I would probably want to look for a type of apple tree or grow a type of apple tree that can be kind of like half wild, if that makes sense. So kind of like your cat, like half wild, half domestic, sort of. I would think about it like that. So I'll explain that a little bit more later, either today or tomorrow. So this here is another photo of the area where the wild relatives to apples came from. It's this beautiful mountainous landscape, and these forests contain tons of trees, not just of the wild apples, but all sorts of different nut trees too. So they're just this like beautiful, like treasure trove of all sorts of edible fruit and nut trees that are really important for all of us, for all humans. They're edible and they're medicinal, and they are things that we need to keep us healthy. But these are areas of the world that have, a lot of these forests have been cut down. And if you see up here in this caption, around 90% of the fruit and nut forests in this area have been destroyed in the past 50 years. So because of that, because there's been such a crazy loss of all of these forests and all of these trees, there are a lot of scientists that are working, well, actually not that many scientists. There's a small group of very dedicated, very intelligent, really wonderful scientists that are taking care of these plants. And I had the great privilege a couple of years ago, I guess at this point, like 3 years ago, to go to a place called the USDA Experimental Apple Orchard in upstate New York. And I'm gonna find some other pictures for you. Let's see, do I have any here? Okay, so I wrote a really long article. Let's see if I can pull up some photos. I got to go to this place, and I'm gonna show you some photos also online of the amazing variety, the diversity of apples that I found when I was there. So this basket, this fruit basket, is just a very small collection of apples that I got to pick in this apple orchard in upstate New York. And isn't that crazy? Have you ever seen that many kinds of apples all in one place? It's pretty awesome. So all of these are things that I got to taste. I had like the option, I was just walking through this orchard and there's like 8,000 different kinds of apples, right? Totally crazy. And I had the option to eat any of them that I could find. Any one that I wanted, I could take a bite of. And just like the ones that I told you about in Kyrgyzstan in those forests, these are just as broad in the way that they taste and the way that they look. The heights of the trees and the different sizes of the leaves and the colors of the bark is super crazy. So some of them were very sweet, some of them were very sour, some of them were really bitter, some of them tasted like nothing at all. And I just thought they were so beautiful that I took a bunch home with me, and then I took this picture. And I took a ton of pictures on this day, and I want to, oops. There we go. The internet always moves way slower when I'm on a Zoom call. So I wrote this very long article, la 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 la, but there's lots of pictures in it. Okay, this one is like the example of what the inside of a red fleshed apple looks like. And I bet, have any of you ever seen an apple that looks like this? Cool, Elliot has. I love these apples. These are like, they're really big. They're often called raspberry apples or something like that. And they're just like one of the most gorgeous things I've ever seen. And there's, let's see. This one here. So these are some really tiny, so these are some of those, like I told you, that grow along the ground. These apples only grow a few feet tall, and then they just droop over onto the ground and just kind of like flop around. They don't get any taller than this. Let's see what's in the chat. Oh yeah, Elliot, you had a miniature one. There are a lot of red-fleshed crabapples that are like that, yeah. Liv asked, do they taste good, the red fleshy ones? They do taste pretty good. They're a little bit sour, and do you know what the word mealy is? Like when you bite an apple and it's not super crisp, a lot of times people use the word mealy. It's like a little bit like that. So the crab apples, and my experience of that was that they were a little bit mealy. So I want to talk a little bit more. I'm going to bring up the whiteboard for 1 second, and then I'm going to give you a little bit on the Latin names. Anybody have questions for now? I see that Liv asked, do they like acidic soil? Elliot, you have a question?
I feel like the miniature red crab apples are really sour. The ones that I had like really light spots all over them.
On the outside or the inside?
What?
On the outside or the inside of the apple?
On the outside.
Interesting. Jaden.
Yes, I didn't really have exactly a question about apples, but if anyone is actually bored after this class, like every Wednesday, there's another class. It's at like 4 o'clock, and it's called Trash Warriors. So if anybody's bored after this class on a Wednesday, that's actually something they can attend too.
How can they get to it?
What?
How can people get to that class?
Mama?
Maybe you can ask your mom and you can give us the information tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that. And you can give us the information tomorrow and I'll put it up on the website.
Okay, yeah, it's really nice. It's still on Zoom. It's just like this with like thousands of other kids.
Thousands. Cool. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the Latin name, let's pick this color. So the one that I told you about, the first one, so Malus is the Latin genus that all of these come from. And the wild apple is Malus sieversii. Whoops. And that's the one that we learned about first. So when people found these wild apples in Central Asia, they decided that they took the ones that they thought were the most delicious, the ones that tasted the best and the ones that grew the way that they wanted them to, and they brought them, they moved them all over the place. So into Europe and then eventually into the United States. And in the United States and in Europe, when they pulled these out of the wild and they started doing different types of breeding, they changed the species name. They came up with basically an entire new species, which is Malus domestica. So the word domestic is right in there. So that's your common apple that we are all the most familiar with. And then there's lots of other, there's lots of other types of apple species. There's something like 53 or 50, there's like 55 specific species in that apple orchard that I got to go to in upstate New York. So the scientists that are taking care of all of the apples in that orchard are taking care of not just the domestica species, but they're taking care of 53 apple species that came originally from this Malus sieversii in Central Asia. Something in the chat. How did the first seed form? The first apple seed form? Well, I mean, I don't necessarily know how the first seed formed, but what we can talk about is I want to talk about how we get all of these apples and how scientists have gotten all of these apples, and we can start with seed. So we have about 5 minutes left in today's class, and then tomorrow we will keep talking about this, and we'll talk about a whole bunch of different other things. So I'm going to bring up a picture. Who has ever bit into an apple and found this? Anyone? Cool. Well, that's good. So this is something that happens every once in a while. Do you know what's happening here? Liv, you want to tell us?
It's sprouting.
Apple tree.
Sorry, say that again, Liv.
It's growing a new apple tree.
Yeah. So Jaden said it's sprouting, and so this is essentially a new apple tree. It's exactly what it is. So these here are the seeds, and you've all seen seeds in apples, right? You probably try not to eat them. So in the middle of an apple, every apple has usually anywhere between like 4 and 10 seeds inside of them. And every single seed inside an apple could be a new tree. The thing that is really weird that most people don't know about when they are thinking about, putting seeds in the ground and growing a new plant is that every single seed in an apple will grow a tree that looks completely different than the tree that it came from, the apple that it came from, and will look completely different from all of the other seeds that also came in that one apple. So if you planted 10 seeds from one apple, you would get 10 completely different kinds of apples, apple trees with 10 completely different kinds of fruit. And some of them might not even get fruit on them. So this is a photo of an apple that somehow accidentally inside the fruit, it started sprouting. And this outer part here is the seed coat, and it pops open and you have this, so this here is the leaf part, that will be the stem and the leaves. And this here is the root. So it's trying to take root inside the apple that it came from. So how long does it take apples to grow from seed? Usually you can get this to happen if you put a seed in, like, has anybody ever tried growing a seed inside a paper towel? Have you ever done that at school or anything? So I'm gonna take a note to try to find a easy activity to do that, because if you have never done it before, it's really cool. But basically, from the time that you put an apple seed in the ground to when it starts to do this, it usually can take like 10 days or so. But it takes a really, really long time to get any amount of like woody plant material from that. It'll probably only be like 8 inches tall maybe after 1 year or so. So it takes a really, really long time. And we're not going to have time in today's class to talk about the other ways that the most common ways that people make apple trees. But there is a whole science that goes into how we get our fruit trees. And I think that you guys will think it's really cool and maybe be able to try it maybe next spring or even in the fall. There are a whole bunch of different ways that you can get apples that are like exactly the way that you want them to be. So in our last couple seconds, does anybody want to tell me their favorite kind of apple? Elliot.
I like red and delicious apples.
Red and delicious apples.
Mhm.
Jaden, what's your favorite kind of apple before we run out of time?
Galen Fuji. Galen Fuji.
Galen Fuji. Baron, what's your favorite kind?
Pink lady.
Pink lady, that's a good one. Liv, what's your favorite? Oh, Liv said pink lady too. Nicole, what's your favorite? Oops, sorry, I have to unmute you. It's not letting me. Try to unmute yourself. What's your favorite?
Good. Oh, I'm with Jaden with the Gala and the Fuji apples.
Yeah, cool.
They're good.
Elijah,